Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place. Hey there.
Hey.
So we're back in front of the rainbow bookcase, which makes me happy.
Me too. Makes me feel very relaxed.
I want to talk about something that it comes up a lot when I'm meeting with people who are afraid that they can't do non-monogamy right.
Okay.
Right. I meet with a lot of people who are very nervous about whether they'll fit into a non-monogamy conversation, even frequently because they just don't see themselves reflected out in the
Oh, yeah.
world,
Okay.
right? Now, first off, I want to name that, of course, we don't get to see enough happy stories of all the different versions of non-monogamy that there are. There's not just one. So if you don't see yourself reflected, remember that many people are not out, and that doesn't mean they don't exist. We're talking about, 5% of the population at any one time. 20% have tried it at some point. And I actually think there's no reason to believe that those aren't underreported numbers, because anything that is not widely accepted is typically underreported when we ask people to disclose about themselves. So there are lots of people doing this, but you might not see yourself represented, or you might feel like the version of what you want out of non-monogamy isn't like correct, doesn't fit, because you might have only seen a couple of examples.
Oh, sure. So
And
your how it feels for you doesn't necessarily match with your imagination of how this is going.
yeah, so how this shows up for me is typically people they've sought out some resources. They've gone online, they've found a couple of maybe Facebook communities, or you found a few websites, or maybe a podcast. I mean, you're listening to one now, and you're presented with an imagination of what non-monogamy is. You fill in the space from okay, monogamy is the norm, and maybe I want something else or something different. You fill it in with, oh, okay, this is what these people are doing. These people are doing non-monogamy. Oh, they have wide open, anything could possibly go. They try to base their decisions on a strong ethic of self-care and care for other, but really there are no rules about how relationships are held. Okay. So that's one kind of non-monogamy. But if that's your first contact, you might start to get the impression that that's the normal kind.
Oh, okay.
Or let's say you find yourself in a community that and I would classify that as like relationship anarchy, sort of tinged. You can go back and listen to the episode we did on the taxonomy of non-monogamy if you're not clear about labels. And there are lots and lots of ways. This is me describing that. I am not the arbiter of the labels people should use for non-monogamy. Everybody gets to label themselves. But if you found yourself wandering into a swingers club as your first
Now you have a completely different normal. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I present myself as non-monogamous, it's often in the context of a sex positive circle. Like I spend a lot of time in sex positive land, right? Like people who are therapists and educators, or they work in sexuality field or an adjacent field. They work in relationships, and so they have a level of comfort around like, oh, I get non-monogamy, that's cool. She's probably polyamorous, right? And they just sort of label me that way without really thinking, and that feels fine for me. But lots and lots of people show up and they're like, they've never heard the word polyamory. I was on 2 calls today and 2 yesterday with people who had not heard the word polyamory, but they had heard about my work, right? So they'd somewhere come across this idea of non-monogamy. So if you're out there listening and you're in that space of like, I don't even know what all the options are, that's not unusual at all. Because I think that the broader point to non-monogamy is that we are all creating something unique. We really are. These labels, they just help us be explicable to others. But there is no label that totally sums up what your relationship structure
And
is.
I heard you talking earlier about the incredibly large number of ways that people do any kind of relationship.
Right. And then, of course, over time, you may be exposed to new and different ways and then start experimenting and trying out different ways to do your non-monogamy. And that's great. That's what I'm here for. I think that that's why non-monogamy is such a fruitful individuation path. It is a place where we can potentially experience more of ourselves. We can face things that really just they want to be known in us. It brings up our stuff and just presents it to
Yeah.
us.
I mean, my experience has been that the situations that I find myself in because of polyamory, um, well, I don't know how I would have gotten to those parts in if I just holding myself in a monogamous container.
Right. So here's the thing though. You did non-monogamy another way before you were
Hmm.
polyamorous.
Yeah.
Because when I got to you, you had been non-monogamous pretty much your whole adult life, certainly for 20 years.
Yeah.
And you didn't know the word polyamory either.
Right. I
And
didn't.
and I didn't. And but you had been non-monogamous. So did you find that your imagination was like constrained by not having examples, or did you just
Mm.
already think you knew?
Oh, yeah. So to some extent, my I did not think I knew, but I thought what what I was doing was defined by what I wasn't doing almost exclusively. So I wasn't abiding by monogamous principles. And that kind of was the core of it. I'm just not doing that. That's not an individuation path, by the way.
No, but
It doesn't, at least
that's
not for me.
that's interesting though, because sometimes people show up in my world and they say, I don't like the system. Like, fuck the
Hmm.
establishment. I don't want to abide by somebody else's pre-described rules. So I'm going to do non-monogamy. But really what they're doing is just saying, I don't want to follow those rules, but they haven't intentionally chosen another path. I think that's okay up to a point, right? But it also leaves us without one of the major technologies of relationships, language,
Yep.
right? So if you are struggling with understanding where you fit into all of the different relationship structures that are possible, um, stretching your imagination is a really important part of the process. Looking for
Yes.
examples, and we don't have tons and tons of them, but I've noticed more and more that people in their 40s and 50s are drawn to my work specifically, and I don't think that that is an accident. I think it's because I'm in my 40s and you're in your 50s, and I
Yeah.
think that there is I love working with younger people and older people than that, but I do think that there's something to be said for acknowledging the way it feels to have gotten to this point in our lives and then saying, I think, you know what, it's kind of now or never. Like
Hmm.
if I don't explore this, if I don't find out whether non-monogamy is for me, like, well, if I don't do it at midlife, when will I do it? And that moment of reckoning is so important. It's a huge opportunity, yeah, to know yourself better by breaking the mold.
Yeah.
We sometimes we talk about breaking the rules, but there aren't actually any
No.
rules. Like, I mean, there are agreements that we can have with our partners, and there are implicit expectations of the culture. But
Very few
outside of like,
actual.
unless you signed a document somewhere, like I don't know, even when I got married, there were very few rules. I didn't do the love, honor, and obey thing because, well, nobody's going to make me obey unless they collar me. And that's a whole other picture. A different discussion entirely.
Who's going to bell the cat?
Thanks. That's great. Um, I think though that when we think about marriage often, we think about, hey, there's a set of rules. But what if non-monogamy for you is really an exploration of what did I actually sign up for originally? Do I even know like
Oh my.
what was this? I don't
Well,
know.
so you were asking about my experience in my first marriage in that non-monogamous relationship, and since we never talked about what we were doing in the marriage itself, we didn't feel the need to talk about what we were doing now that was different.
Okay.
Like we had
So
a pattern of not talking about it, and
so
so
first you didn't define the
didn't
monogamy.
define the monogamy.
So then you shifted to, okay, we're not doing monogamy, but we hadn't defined monogamy. So now we haven't defined non-monogamy. This is so common. I see this every
Oh,
single
okay.
day. People, and it happens in my research interviews as well, where I say, so tell me, how did you first establish what the rules were in your relationship? You're telling me that your partner knows the rules that will keep your relationship safe. How did you establish them? And frequently I hear crickets.
Mhm.
There's this moment of like, well, they're just the rules. And I think that for me, recognizing that I had signed on for a lifetime to spend with someone where I was never going to actually know what I had signed on for until I tried to dissolve that marriage. Like
Yeah.
the only
Right.
time I found out what my marriage was actually based on was when I dissolved it. And that's so sad. And it's a disservice to marriage, like as a whole concept, I think, because
Because if you do it earlier along, you can actually pursue the things you want out of the relationship that you've got there.
so when you and I first got together, we were both very anti-marriage.
Yeah.
We had both gone through the kind of marriages that we thought were just wrong, and we got very anti-marriage. I have since processed that a lot, and I'm actually a big fan of marriage. And in fact, I even married you, which was weird. It was a weird choice, weird flex, but I did. And the thing that was so different is before we got married, we made an agreement, but we did not make a forever agreement.
Right.
We intentionally made an agreement that was designed to have not an expiration, but a natural revisiting that required us to come together and honestly say what was working, what isn't working, what we need to change, what we want to change, and to imagine the relationship forward. And that to me is where Jungian psychology is so helpful to relationships, so underutilized. So Jungian psychology, the whole premise of like, it is your imagination that will create your reality, right? You access the imagination through dream work or through fantasy work, through active imagination work, which allows you to engage fully with this just wild ass thing we have called an imagination. It's
Yeah.
so brilliant. It provides us a a vision of what could be
Hmm.
that is so uniquely rooted in our own consciousness that only we could have it, right? Your imagination is so uniquely yours. And then if you take that and apply that to your relationship and say, what if I what if I consciously, intentionally set up a time when I'm going to say, I'm going to imagine this relationship fresh. I
Yeah.
can't imagine how I wouldn't wind up exploring non-monogamy as one of the things I might imagine in any given relationship. The same goes for friendships with me. I can't imagine starting a friendship and not saying, I'm going to want to keep imagining this. I don't want to sign a
Yeah.
forever agree. I don't even know how could I possibly do that?
About 2 minutes ago in this conversation, I was going to ask you, as you were talking about how we revisit, and I was going to ask you what your strongest favorite tool was for that process, and then you spent the next 2 minutes answering it, which is your imagination.
Yeah, and the smaller, so the my imagination is like the big toolbox, and the very smallest tool, the key is to open that is to plan to use it
That's
right? Like
so
I
important,
need the
right.
key to open the
Mhm.
toolbox and say, like, I already have within me the potential to make changes, to create something new, to do something completely custom, to break the rules, or to explore being inside the rules. You and I
Yeah,
took a whole year and intentionally dove deep into monogamy right at the beginning of our marriage. And that was the iconoclastic thing for us to do in that
yeah,
moment.
right, for the way we had approached it.
But the only reason I was able to do that was because we had already predetermined that we would revisit it. So it
Yep,
was safe for
right.
me to explore monogamy
So it was a bounded container.
in a bounded container.
Mhm.
And then I imagined deep into it. I remember spending some time with you on our honeymoon. I remember doing a workout, and right after workouts, I would get really, I would often cry at the end of like CrossFit, man, what the hell was I doing? I would get really weepy, and I remember doing a workout and then being in this sort of liminal space of like sort of quasi consciousness and crying about how incredibly beautiful it was that we might decide to be monogamous. Like it was, and it I had busted my whole life open for you specifically so that you and I could do this thing all free with none of those constraints. And then,
And then your imagination was like, this could be beautiful.
and it and it was like it still brings tears to my eyes because it absolutely could have been. And then it actually was for a while until it didn't fit anymore.
Mhm.
But since we already had an agreement to revisit,
Yeah.
it was It was easeful, it didn't feel threatening to say, "Hey, it's time for me to reimagine."
Right,
Are
because it
you
was already it
and
wasn't a threat. It was like, I want to reimagine this because it's not working, or um no, because we said we would.
so there's the difference.
It's the intentionality for me
So
all the way along.
we're gonna do a whole episode on relationship check-ins at some point where I'll outline my relationship check-in process, but that aside, relationship check-ins, like, yeah, there should be, like, the micro level where, like, week to week
Mhm.
or even day to day, depending on what you're doing in your relationship. Having a formal check-in is important, and the reason I call it formal is you plan it.
Mhm.
It's expected, and when I talk to people so frequently, people, brilliant people, all day long, I talk to these brilliant humans who are so successful in so many areas of their life, and when I ask them if they do relationship check-ins or if they have a process for that, they frequently say, "Well, we spend so much time talking about our relationship." Or, "Well, no, but we have lots of time together and we do talk about stuff." And I
Mhm.
think, "Cool. Do you ever talk about it when there isn't something bothering one of you?" And frequently, again, there's a pause. And upon introspection, it becomes obvious that no, 90% or more of the time they're talking about their relationships, they're focused on problems because there is no formal process that helps them visit it when they're both regulated, calm, excited, potentially just full of nothing but gratitude for the relationship. And also there's no built-in, hey, let's also start with celebrations and gratitudes. Let's make sure that we're building that part in.
Yeah, because it's when you're just talking about whatever has come up, it is rarely that went really well. Like those aren't the things that bubble up usually on a day-to-day basis in my experience.
Right.
So you might not end up talking about those at all, so you don't get to celebrate them.
Right. And so this is just so whether that's on a micro scale of like, are you having weekly relationship check-ins or monthly or whatever is appropriate for the time you have to spend with your persons, or whether this is on a larger scale, having our agreement built in to have yearly large scale. It's I wouldn't call it a check-in because it's bigger than that. It's a reimagining.
Mhm.
But it is also a check-in. Like within the reimagining is this automatic, hey, and we do it in September because that's our anniversary month. That's when we do that. Every single time we've done that, it's been incredibly rejuvenating.
Yeah,
We
that's
know it's
true.
coming. We know to prepare for it. It's very easy to build the positive into it, but also the chances of every single September being a time when we're in a massive state of disarray are low, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
unless your relationship is filled with massive states of disarray, which let's have another conversation because that's not great. So it gives us this time to go more deeply into the imagination of it. And I mean, it's let us reimagine how we share our time together, how we each turn out and build our lives, build our friendships, build the rest of our lives. But it's also let us do things like reimagine our the labor split in our
Yep.
household,
Yeah,
our
right.
parenting,
All the yeah, not just the yeah, so the structure of our lives in general beyond our
right?
relationship.
But I don't think that we would ever do that from a place of truly open, generative, like, wow, what could be, unless we had it on the calendar, because it's too easy to fall into the habit of talking about stuff when it's a problem. So,
Yeah.
using parenting as an example, I mean, okay, the youngest child is about to turn 16. We're not done parenting, and also I don't think it's ever done, but we have made it. We have parented 7 children almost to adulthood. It required adaptation along the way, just like any
Yes.
relationship
Mhm.
requires. And if the only adaptation happened when everybody was at a dysregulated state or something was going wrong, and this happened in the early days of our trying to figure out how to co-parent,
Yeah, it did. You're right.
most of our parenting restructuring happened when, "Ugh, this isn't working. The co-parenting isn't working, or the schedule is not working, or one of the children is having a particularly rough go right now." So it's all
Mhm.
problematized stuff, and we rarely got to really work from a place of like, "Wow, like look at these amazing children we have. Let's imagine this forward. Let's imagine it bigger." So the phrase that keeps coming to mind is dreaming the dream onward, right? Like
Okay. Yeah.
imagining the relationships forward from a place of generativity and creativity. So
Creativity,
exciting.
your natural creativity was what brought those those generative moments of how can we make this more, not just how do we fix the problems, but even in those days you were the one who would come up with, hey, what if we did this thing to like help bring us together or to make the everybody's lives a little richer. um
And that is so one of my like default
mm,
settings is toward like so one of my defenses when I am overstimulated and overscheduled is to add more, to
yeah,
get extra creative and extra productive.
right.
And while that comes at a cost, and it definitely is something I've been working on in my own therapeutic processes, because it can also look like piling on more and more to a stressed body. But it did mean that when I was stressed or when we were stressed in our relationship, I would get creative. And not everybody has that particular
I don't.
coping
I
mechanism.
don't.
And
Yeah.
so when you don't have that as a natural setting, the calendar is your friend.
Hmm.
Your
Hmm.
calendar is your friend. Scheduling times to revisit agreements and allowing yourselves also to build to a time when, okay, now we're going to explore this new imagination. So when I'm bringing people into the year of opening, for instance, frequently people will talk with me and say, so we want to do this. We want to explore opening, and the container of the year of opening sounds great, but we're not ready to start this month. I'm like, that's fine. I'm enrolling for the next one too, and that's going to start in 3 months. That's great. No problem. That can give you that runway to allow yourself
Yeah.
to allow space for your imagination to open. Most of us can't just snap our fingers and pop into imaginative, creative, like just
But if you know it's coming, you can prepare for it
you can
and be
prepare.
ready.
And and for many of us, especially if monogamy is not just the norm, but we were trained to think it is correct. We may have guilt process. We may have not just norms to set down, but like deep guilt for even questioning this reality. And so giving yourself a runway of a few months is one of the techniques that
Yeah.
can work really well.
Because those things can get in the way of your imagination and your creativity.
And yet, this is also why it's important to sign on or to put that date on the calendar, because if you don't, it's also completely possible, and I see this constantly, and you have certainly fallen into this more often than not. I'll get there.
I'll do it later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will. So how this looked for me is watching you say, well, we'll explore, like for instance, there was a kink dynamic we really wanted to explore. We both wanted to, and you were like, I'll get there. And then like 3 years went by because it never just a time never presented itself
Time never
magically
presented itself.
and said,
Yep.
"Here, Kenneth, please explore this kink right now, or
Which
explore opening, or what, insert whatever."
which makes perfect sense. Of course it doesn't come up. If it had come up, it would already have come up.
Yeah.
But this was something that wasn't part of our life. And so to bring it in, particularly in the complex life we live,
Mm.
gotta make a space for it.
Make a
Or
space
it won't make space for itself.
to explore, because
To explore.
in my world, the point of exploring opening isn't to get you from monogamy to polyamory, or from monogamy to relationship anarchy, or monogamy to anything particular. It's just to help you expand your imagination of what your relationship could be, what it could be if you actively created it and took full agency in your role in creating every single aspect of your relationship. And that is, I'm just going to name it, it's a little threatening to realize that I am creating the reality of my relationship.
It is. It is threatening
I saw your
because
panic
I,
face.
I hear you say that. It's like, oh, and on the list of the thing that I have created out of myself is all the things I don't like about it. Oh, crap.
There you
Oh,
go.
whoopsie doodle. So that's my responsibility then. Oh,
Right.
stunning. But also, I mean, to me, an optimist, ooh, exciting, threatening and exciting. Because, well, theoretically, then I could change it.
As all good adventures are,
Hmm.
right? Like there
Yeah,
is
right.
no amazing adventure that doesn't have an
Right.
element of to go with,
Yeah.
right? Um there's an element of fear to face change,
Yeah.
and allowing yourself to let go of that fear, or to um suspend that belief that things won't work out long enough to just imagine before you even take the steps to, like, get on a dating app, or have a kiss with someone who you're not married to, or before you even really figure out what language you want to use around this. Before all of that comes the imagination,
This is,
imagining that you could
yeah,
create your own
this is how you
paradigm.
taught me to cook well.
Oh,
This is exactly it.
thank
So,
God.
so there I
Put
was.
meat
I
back
know
in
how
the
to
door.
cook. I know how to, make food edible. But what if I wanted to make really good food?
I'm
And
very
the
picky.
thing that was completely missing was imagining what the completed dish was going to be, what it was going to look like, what it was going to feel like all the pieces. I would just follow the recipe step by step without imagining what the end was going to be. And when I didn't imagine, it came out fine at best. And then I started imagining, well, what's this going to be when I'm done? And all of a sudden, the spice came out, the energy.
You brought yourself to it,
I brought myself to it, and
and you
that's
left mediocrity behind, which,
yay.
thank God, my taste buds really needed
Yeah.
that.
No.
They really did.
So it's this isn't just a relationship skill. What are you doing? Well, imagine what the outcome is going to be, and then do the things that will get you there.
And I could give another example, because people walked into the gym all the
Yeah.
time, walked into the gym with us, and they couldn't yet imagine a life where they could just comfortably get up and down out of a chair. They
Right.
just couldn't. And it was possible for us to imagine it for them. And all I needed them to do was just just open their imagination far enough so that they could show up for a couple of weeks, right? But there is this, they did have to open their imagination just
Mhm.
that much so that we could create a little bit of space to explore what it might feel like to do something different.
And intentionally working that into our life on a monthly, yearly, tri-yearly basis of, hey, it's time to reimagine. What are we going to do now?
So you just did that yesterday. You had a birthday.
I did.
Happy
Yeah.
birthday.
Thank you.
You're 56 years old now, and I saw you. This was awesome, and I'm going to celebrate the hell out of it. Everybody, congratulate Ken. I was busy all day long, and you drew cards for yourself and made meaning out of this turn of this twirl around the sun, all on your own. You have never done in 13 years together.
That's
You have
true.
never done that. I
Yeah.
have always provided that.
Yeah.
So you imagined something new, and then you did it.
Yeah.
Hooray.
Thank you.
Okay, that was fantastic. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. There's no one right way to design your relationship. And lots of people, actually about 25%, according to a recent national survey, are interested in some type of open relationship. But how do you know if you are ready to open up happily? Not everyone is, and that's no problem. I've got a 60-second quiz that will give you the answer. And even better, you'll walk away with your next step, whether you're good to go or not so much when it comes to opening up. And this is no BuzzFeed nonsense. I personally designed this quiz from my years of academic research. Go to joliquiz.com. That's JOLIQUIZ.com and find out if you're ready to open up happily and what to do if you are or if you're not.